So far in this series, we've considered equations, linear equations written in standard form. Here we have the example that we've been using all along, 3x plus 4y equals 12. And we, in our first video, were able to determine just by looking at it that the slope of this line had to be negative 3/4. Again, the sign of the slope is the opposite of the sign that's between the x term and the y term on the left side of the equation. Since that sign is a plus sign, we see that the slope is negative. And then the numerator of the slope is the x coordinate, or x coefficient, pardon me, and the denominator of the slope is the coefficient of the y term. Okay, so now, though, we're going to talk about perpendicular lines. We know that parallel lines have the same slope, but what is the relationship between the slopes of lines that are perpendicular? Well, perpendicular lines have a relationship that's called a negative reciprocal. So what that means is that the slope of a line perpendicular to 3x, and let me extend that a bit. Okay, the slope of the perpendicular line, and I represent that by m with the perpendicular symbol, that slope is going to be the negative reciprocal of 3/4. Now, reciprocal means that we take the original fraction and flip it upside down. So that means that we know we're going to have 4 in the numerator and 3 in the denominator. And the negative part of the negative reciprocal means that the slope of the perpendicular is going to have the opposite sign of the original slope. So since the original slope of this line was negative 3/4, the slope of the perpendicular line is going to be positive 4/3. So let's do a couple more examples of that type. Here's another line, 5x minus 7y equals 35. So using our method to figure out the slope of this line, first of all, we see that there's a minus sign between the x term and the y term, which means that our slope is going to be positive. So let's write our fraction bar. And then the coefficient of the x is 5, so we put that in the numerator. And the coefficient of the y is 7, we put that in the denominator. So the slope of this line, 5x minus 7y equals 35, has to be 5/7. So the slope of the perpendicular line is the negative reciprocal. So the slope of the perpendicular line, looking back at the original slope 5/7 is positive, which means that the slope of the perpendicular line will be negative. So we have the negative reciprocal. Reciprocal means we flip the original fraction. So that means we'll have now 7 in the numerator and 5 in the denominator. So the slope of the perpendicular line will be negative 7/5. Here's another example. The standard form for this equation is 7x plus 3y equals 21. Using our same method, we can see that the slope, first of all, we see that there's a plus sign between the x and y terms, so that means that our slope is going to be negative. The coefficient of the x term is 7, so we put that in the numerator of our slope. And the coefficient of the y term is 3, so we put that in the denominator of our slope. And so then looking at that slope, the slope of the perpendicular line, and so we're looking for the slope of the perpendicular line. Since the original slope is negative, the slope of the perpendicular will be positive. And then we take the reciprocal, so we put the 3 in the numerator and the 7 in the denominator. So the slope of any line that's perpendicular to 7x plus 3y equals 21, the slope of the perpendicular lines will be positive 3/7. And so now we have another line. This one is x minus 7y equals 14. So the slope of this line First of all, we look at the sign. Since there's a minus sign between the x term and the y term, we know that this slope is going to be positive, so we just write the fraction bar. Now, the coefficient of the x term, notice that there is no coefficient written. When that happens, we know that the coefficient is 1. So the coefficient of x in this case is 1, and we're going to put that in the numerator of our slope. And then the coefficient of the y term is 7, and we put that in the denominator of our slope. So the slope of this line, x minus 7y equals 14, is 1/7. So now to get the slope of the perpendicular line, the slope of the perpendicular line is the negative reciprocal. So first of all, since the original slope is positive, we know that the slope of the perpendicular will be negative. And we write our fraction bar. So the negative reciprocal, now we're going to flip the original fraction, and we get 7 over 1. And we can reduce that a bit, so we know that the slope of the perpendicular line is going to be -7. So hopefully this is a helpful method of figuring out the slopes of perpendicular lines. In our next videos, we're going to talk about how to use this to get the actual equations of perpendicular lines.